Imagine a stranger looking you in the eye.
Mm-hmm.
It's 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night. They hand you this grease-stained paper bag, and they just say, "See you tomorrow."
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I mean, they know your apartment number, they know your exact exhaustion levels after a long shift, and they know with like algorithmic certainty that you desperately need extra chili flakes on your noodles.
Right. They have the data.
Exactly. So is that the absolute peak of modern luxury and convenience, or is it, a massive flashing red flag that we've completely lost control of our basic survival skills?
It is, well, it's the ultimate modern paradox, really. We have basically outsourced the very act of feeding ourselves to a network of strangers and smartphones.
Yep, completely outsourced it.
Right. And visually, if you think of this divide, it's like a split screen representing how we live today. On one side, you have a warmly lit, rustic kitchen.
Sounds cozy.
Yeah, pots hanging from the ceiling, the soft ambient glow of a gas burner. There's flour on a wooden cutting board. It's messy, it's tangible, and it requires actual physical effort.
And the other side?
On the other side of the screen, you just have a sleek, minimalist smartphone, glowing in the dark. It's displaying a food delivery interface with this countdown timer relentlessly ticking down the minutes until your meal arrives.
It's just watching the little car icon move across the map.
Exactly.
Well, that split screen is exactly what we are jumping into today. We're looking at the modern dietary divide, basically the fierce battle between the kitchen and the app.
Right.
And we are pulling from a really unique source to do this. It's a transcript from an English language and linguistics show featuring two speakers, Emma and John, who are, going head to head on the merits of home cooking versus takeout.
But there's a catch, right?
Yeah, the twist here is that we aren't just looking at the food they choose to eat. We are analyzing the exact words they use to defend those choices.
Which is fascinating.
Totally. We're extracting the vocabulary, we're dissecting the psychology of our evening habits, and exploring how the language we use actively shapes our daily survival.
Because the vocabulary we use isn't just descriptive, it's constructive. The words we choose to describe our relationship with the kitchen, they actually build the psychological walls around our habits.
That makes total sense. So for everyone listening, visualize your own kitchen right now. Is it that bustling hub of culinary creation, or is it a pristine, untouched gallery space?
Just a monument to meals that never actually happened.
Exactly. Let's start with John, because his situation with his delivery driver is incredible. John confesses that his driver didn't just drop off the food.
Right. There was a whole interaction.
Yeah, the driver gave him this, knowing nod, knows his name, knows his specific penchant for extra chili flakes, and actually says, "See you tomorrow, John."
That is wild.
And John's reaction is just to accept it. He calls himself a creature of habit. But Emma hears this and immediately, throws a penalty flag.
Oh, she shuts it down.
Yeah, she calls it a red flag and suggests he needs serious self-reflection.
Which is a really fascinating psychological tension between community and, algorithmic prediction. Historically, having someone know your order was the hallmark of community integration.
Like the local pub.
Exactly. It's the local bartender sliding your drink across the counter before you even sit down, or the baker saving your favorite loaf.
Wait, I actually want to push back on that.
Yeah.
Because if I walk into my local coffee shop and the barista already has my iced Americano ready, I feel seen. I feel like a valued, regular,
Sure, yeah.
Isn't perfectly predicted service exactly what modern convenience apps are designed to achieve? Why is Emma treating this like a psychological failing?
That's a great point, but the difference lies in the mechanism of the relationship and the venue of the interaction.
How do you mean?
Well, when the bartender knows your drink, you have gone out into the community to participate in a social ritual. When the delivery driver predicts your Tuesday night order, it often implies an outsourcing of basic domestic survival because you are just too depleted to function.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's an app tracking your exhaustion levels, your dopamine needs, and your routine down to a granular science. Emma views it as a red flag because John hasn't built a community. He has built a dependency on a logistics network.
Wow. So he's basically just a node in a logistics network receiving his daily fuel.
Precisely. And if we look closely at the language John uses to defend his lifestyle against Emma's judgment, it's incredibly revealing.
Oh, the stove comment.
Yes. She asks him when he last actually used his stove. And what follows, according to the transcript, is a highly uncomfortable, pregnant pause.
The pregnant pause.
Yeah.
The silence where all the domestic guilt lives.
Exactly. And when he finally breaks that silence, pay attention to the specific verb he chooses. He says he hasn't utilized his stove recently.
Utilize. That is such a sterile boardroom word.
It really is.
I mean, you utilize a pivot table in Excel. You don't utilize a hearth.
Right. It is a complete corporate sterilization of the home space. By choosing the word utilized, John is subconsciously distancing himself from the emotional, nurturing warmth traditionally associated with cooking.
He's making it sound mechanical.
Exactly. He is framing the stove not as a place of creation, but as a piece of industrial equipment that he simply has, no current operational need for. In fact, he literally describes his stove as a glorified storage shelf and a pristine, minimalist gallery space.
The gallery space.
Yeah.
He's treating his appliances like modern art installations.
Right.
Like look but don't touch.
Right.
But then he tries to defend himself by saying he did use it recently to make artisanal toast. He didn't just make toast. He made artisanal toast.
Which is just hilarious.
Right. He's rebranding the act of heating up a slice of bread to sound like he's, a 19th century blacksmith practicing a lost craft.
It's a brilliant linguistic shield.
Uh-huh.
He elevates the absolute simplest, most basic act of applying heat to a carbohydrate into something artisanal to reclaim some sense of culinary dignity.
So it's totally a defense mechanism.
100%.
Yeah.
He feels the guilt of the untouched gallery space, so he uses an inflated adjective to make his minimal effort sound deliberate and cultured.
I love that. We do these linguistic gymnastics all the time to avoid feeling lazy. Which brings us to how they discuss the actual act of acquiring the food. John talks about how he wants to order in, and Emma stops him to break down that specific phrasal verb.
Yeah. Order in.
Right.
The contrast between order in and dine in represents a massive architectural and really psychological shift in how we interact with the outside world. Think about the physical reality of these phrases.
Okay, let's break it down.
To order in means you remain completely stationary. The outside world is basically commanded to cross the threshold of your home and deliver the resources directly to you.
The sofa becomes the command center. You aren't venturing out to hunt and gather. You are summoning the hunt to your living room.
Exactly. While dining in, which historically meant eating at home rather than going out now, often means physically going to the restaurant's premises to eat inside their establishment.
That's such a flip.
It is. The terminology has shifted to center the home as a fortress. Ordering in removes the friction of the public square entirely. You don't have to put on shoes, you don't have to navigate weather, you don't have to engage in social pleasantries beyond, opening the door.
And honestly, sometimes you just click leave at door to avoid even that. But this shift isn't just about physical space. It's also about how we perceive time. There is this amazing moment in the source where John hits a wall in real time with his own grammar.
Oh, this part's brilliant.
Yeah, he's trying to describe his takeout habits for the current week, and he stops. He asks Emma, is it I have had takeout twice or I had takeout twice?
And this is where language perfectly reflects our psychological relationship with our own actions. The dilemma is about an unfinished time frame.
Right.
Emma, who clearly has a really strong grasp of linguistics, steps in and explains that because the week is still ongoing, the present perfect tense is the necessary choice. I have had takeout twice this week.
Okay, wait, back up for a second. Let's break down the mechanics of the present perfect here. Why does the ongoing week mandate that specific structure?
Well, the present perfect tense connects the past to the present. It is used for actions that occurred in a time period that has not yet closed.
Okay, so the week is still happening.
Exactly. If John were to say, I had takeout twice this week, using the simple past tense, he would be grammatically closing the book on the week. He would be implying that the week is functionally over or that there is absolutely zero possibility of him eating takeout again before Sunday night.
I see. He'd be declaring the damage is done and finalized.
Exactly. But saying I have had leaves the door wide open. It acknowledges that the time period is still active, the state of affairs is ongoing.
It's like keeping a tab open at a bar.
Yes.
The simple past is closing the tab and walking out the door. The present perfect is looking at the bartender and saying, keep it open, we'll see where the night goes.
That is a perfect analogy. The grammatical structure of the present perfect holds both opportunity and dread. It forces you to acknowledge that your behavioral pattern is still active and accumulating.
So think about your own Thursday night habits, right? Are you living in the simple past where your dietary choices are finalized and locked in? Or are you living in the present perfect where your habits, whether it's cooking meals or ordering in, are still piling up?
Right, like saying, I have had 3 coffees today.
Exactly. The day isn't over.
Yeah.
You're staring down the barrel of potential 4th coffee. Living in that I have had state creates this psychological void of anticipation.
And it forces you to look at your behavior while you still possess the agency to change it for that specific time period, which naturally begs the question, what drives us to keep that tab open? What pushes John to leave the possibility of a 3rd or 4th takeout meal on the table?
Well, John lays out his primary arguments for this lifestyle, and honestly, they are aggressively relatable.
They really are.
He defends the app. He says takeout is expedient, it is fast, it is practical, and after a brutally long day, it completely bypasses the need for a culinary project. It's hassle-free, there are no grocery runs, no prep work, and crucially, no washing up.
He is highlighting the complete elimination of cognitive and physical friction. When you are operating at a deficit of energy, expedient is the most valuable trait a service can offer.
But then he pivots from the practical to the primal, right?
Yeah.
He stops talking about convenience and starts talking about desire. He brings up the concept of a craving.
He uses the word craving and also introduces a fantastic synonym. He calls it a hankering.
Yes, a hankering. Let's dissect the difference between just being hungry and having a hankering, because John is very clear that they are not the same thing at all.
Definitely not.
Hunger is just the body's check engine light coming on. It's a biological need for calories. But a craving is a highly specific, intense, visceral target. It's not, I need fuel. It is, I need Thai green curry and absolutely nothing else on this entire planet will satisfy me.
The distinction is vital. Hunger is physiological, but a craving is psychological. A hankering is an emotional need that has somehow attached itself to a specific flavor profile.
Right.
And what's fascinating in the transcript is that Emma, who operates as the fierce defender of the home kitchen, actually concedes this point.
She does.
Yeah, she admits that she is not immune. She confesses to having a craving for a rich tiramisu, but she uses a very specific adjective. She calls her craving perilous.
Perilous, full of danger or risk. Why is a craving for coffee-soaked cake perilous to her?
Because it threatens her identity. Emma has constructed her entire self-image around being a disciplined, economical home cook. A craving is an irrational, emotional urge that bypasses logic and economics completely.
So for John, it's normal.
Right, for John, a craving is just a Tuesday. For Emma, giving in to that craving is a perilous breach of her own rules. It undermines the very foundation of her argument against the takeout app.
It exposes the cracks in the fortress. And to deal with that psychological breach, Emma introduces this wonderful phrase to justify giving in. She calls it deciding to splash out.
To splash out. It's an idiom meaning to spend money freely and lavishly on a luxury or a treat, like deciding to spring for a wildly expensive birthday-tasting menu instead of your usual dinner.
But look at how we use this in modern free culture. We linguistically reframe the expense. When we give in to the perilous craving, we don't call it a breakdown of discipline. We don't call it cutting corners or being lazy.
No, we call it a reward.
Exactly. We are splashing out. We are treating ourselves because we survived a Tuesday. So I have to ask you, where is the actual boundary line between living a life of well-deserved convenience and a life where you are just chronically cutting corners and calling it a treat?
The boundary is almost entirely constructed by the narrative we apply to our consumption. When we use a phrase like splashing out, we are applying a narrative of celebration. We are elevating a standard financial transaction into a special event.
Giving ourselves a pass.
Yeah, we are giving ourselves permission to suspend our normal economic and dietary rules. But if you are splashing out 3 times a week, the narrative collapses.
It's no longer a luxury, right? It has become the baseline. The language just hasn't caught up to the reality of the behavior.
The narrative provides the cover story for the habit. And that emotional cover story reaches its absolute peak when Emma and John discuss comfort food.
Oh, this is a great part.
Emma asks John what his go-to takeout order is. His default, reliable, break glass in case of emergency choice. John says it's spicy dan dan noodles, but it's not the food itself, it's his description of it. He describes those noodles as a hug in a bowl.
It is a stunning piece of imagery, a hug in a bowl. It completely strips away the nutritional aspect of the food and reveals its true function, which is consolation.
Yeah, consolation.
Comfort food isn't about sustenance. It's about emotional regulation. It provides a feeling of well-being, a sense of safety, often tied to a deep nostalgic or sentimental connection. Because when you have had a soul-crushing day at the office, you aren't looking for a balanced macronutrient profile. You are looking for consolation. You are looking for a hug.
And this is the immense power of the app. If a piece of software can deliver a physical manifestation of comfort, a hug in a bowl to your door in 20 minutes with absolutely zero physical effort or cleanup required on your part, it becomes an almost irresistible proposition to a depleted human being.
So think about your own life for a second. What is your ultimate, undeniable go-to comfort food? When the exhaustion hits and your decision fatigue is at maximum capacity, what is your default choice? What is your personal hug in a bowl?
Everyone has one.
Is it a specific type of spicy needle? A massive greasy pizza? A childhood dish your grandmother used to make? Hold on to that mental image, because the emotional weight of that dish really dictates how hard it is to side with Emma in the second half of this debate.
Because Emma represents the home cook's philosophy, which provides a fundamentally different type of comfort. Her comfort doesn't arrive in a paper bag. It is generated through action.
Right. Emma steps up to defend the honor of the kitchen. For her, the act of cooking isn't a project or a chore to be avoided. She calls it her therapeutic hour.
Yes.
She finds actual solace in the physical, rhythmic act of chopping vegetables and sautéing onions. It's a complete inversion of John's worldview.
It's the difference between viewing labor as a tax on your time versus viewing labor as a meditative practice.
And her primary logical argument for this labor is meticulous control. Control over the ingredients. When she cooks, she knows exactly what is going into her body. She is actively avoiding the hidden sugars, the excessive sodium, the highly processed, questionable oils that are, notoriously pumped into restaurant takeout to make it taste so addictive.
But then she drops what she calls her trump card.
Yeah.
The ultimate defense of the kitchen, which is economics. The economic argument. This is historically the most heavily contested battleground between convenience and domesticity.
She claims that relying on takeout is a false economy. She believes she is beating the system through the strategy of batch cooking.
Right, making huge amounts at once.
Exactly. Preparing massive portions at once, like a giant pot of Sunday chili or a huge vegetable curry, specifically to generate leftovers that will cover 2 or 3 lunches during the work week. She operates heavily on a from-scratch philosophy, insisting on using basic, raw ingredients like flour, sugar, and eggs, rather than relying on a prepackaged box mix.
And she pushes back on John's idea that cooking has to take hours, right? Pointing out that pasta, one of the most beloved global dishes, can be made from scratch in minutes.
The contrast in their self-identities here is incredibly stark. Emma has clearly internalized the identity of a culinary artist, creator. John, on the other hand, explicitly accepts his role as a passive assembler or just a consumer.
Totally.
But I need to push back hard on Emma's economic trump card here. Let's talk about this false economy. If time is literally money, does the hours spent grocery shopping, prepping, batch cooking, standing over a hot stove, and then cleaning a mountain of pots and pans genuinely make her method more economical?
That's the real question.
Or is Emma simply valuing her personal free time at a much lower rate than John values his?
That is the crux of the debate, and it raises a vital question about what metric we are actually using to define value. When Emma uses the specific phrase false economy, she is aggressively deconstructing the illusion that convenience saves you anything in the aggregate.
Right.
A false economy is a deceptive action that appears to save money or time in the short term, but over a longer horizon results in a much greater loss.
It's like buying cheap boots that wear out in a month, so you have to buy 12 pairs a year, instead of just buying one expensive pair that lasts a decade.
Exactly. Emma is connecting physiological health directly to financial wisdom. By controlling the ingredients, by forcefully eliminating the hidden sugars and sodium of the takeout industry, she is arguing that she is investing in her long-term health.
Avoiding the doctor bills.
Right. Avoiding future medical bills, lethargy, and poor health is, in her view, the ultimate economic strategy. John is trading his long-term health for the short-term convenience of an expedient Tuesday evening.
But going back to the time aspect, if John works a grueling job, that hour of batch cooking on a Sunday feels like unpaid labor stealing his weekend.
And that is where the concept of the therapeutic hour becomes the deciding factor. Emma does not view that hour as labor.
She likes it.
Yeah, she is extracting psychological value, mindfulness, decompression, sensory pleasure from the time spent chopping and stirring. Her time is not being stolen, it is being invested. For John, because he lacks the skills and the interest, that same hour would be an exercise in pure frustration. It would be a net negative on his well-being.
And this psychological valuation doesn't just apply to the time spent, it physically extends to the output of the food itself.
Especially when we look at how they talk about leftovers, the remnants of a meal that are saved for later consumption.
The linguistic divergence on the word leftovers in the source material is deeply revealing.
It's so funny.
Listen to the contrast. John describes his takeout leftovers as things that usually become science experiments rotting in the back of his fridge. We know exactly what he means. It's that sad, wilting styrofoam container pushed behind the milk that you actively avoid making eye contact with every time you open the door.
Right. It's an object of mild disgust. But Emma describes her home-cooked leftovers as a delight. She actually looks forward to them. Why is there such a massive gap in how they perceive the exact same concept of remaining food?
It has to be the origin of the food, right?
It is entirely about the origin. Food made from scratch, starting from basic raw ingredients rather than a prepackaged mix or a restaurant kitchen, carries the energetic and psychological signature of the creator's effort.
Because she made it herself.
Exactly. When Emma Batch cooks a chili from scratch, she has invested her therapeutic hour, her attention, and her physical labor into it. It holds intrinsic value because she created it. When John orders takeout, the transaction is purely financial, and it concludes the moment his initial hunger is satiated.
The remnants in the plastic container have zero emotional equity.
Exactly. They lose their value rapidly. They devolve from a hug in a bowl into basically discarded material waiting for the garbage bin. Our psychological valuation of the food, our respect for it, changes entirely based on whether it emerged from our own hands or from a logistics app.
You respect the batch-cooked chili because it's your creation. The science experiment is just a stranger's trash you haven't thrown away yet.
Well said.
But having that respect for the kitchen requires a baseline of competence. It requires a skill set. And this brings us to the actual physical mechanics of cooking. Because John admits that when he attempts to step into the kitchen and actually cook, the primary result is setting off the smoke alarm.
Yeah, he describes his culinary creations with a very specific, tragic adjective. He calls his food sad.
Sad food. And Emma, acting as the linguistic detective, realizes that part of this problem isn't just a lack of physical coordination. It is a fundamental lack of vocabulary. He literally doesn't have the words to describe what he's supposed to be doing.
So she initiates a kitchen boot camp.
She does. She walks him through the essential verbs.
The operating system of the kitchen.
Right. She starts with the basics. Peel, removing the outer layer of a vegetable or fruit. John proudly puffs up his chest and claims that peeling is his one and only reliable culinary skill.
Good for him.
Yeah. Then she moves to stir, a continuous circular motion used to mix ingredients or prevent them from sticking to the bottom of the pan. But then we cross the threshold into nuance. She introduces the word simmer.
Ah, to simmer. To cook a liquid gently, holding it just below the boiling point. It's characterized by small, gentle bubbles breaking the surface, which allows complex flavors to meld together slowly without destroying the cellular structure of the ingredients.
And John's reaction to learning the definition of simmering produces arguably the greatest analogy in the entire source transcript.
It's so good.
He says, so boiling is a rock concert and simmering is a yoga retreat.
It perfectly captures the energy states of the water.
It does. And he freely admits that his cooking history consists exclusively of rock concerts. He just blasts everything on maximum heat, which totally explains why the smoke alarm is his constant kitchen companion.
Makes total sense.
And finally, Emma teaches him the most critical word of all, season. The act of adding salt, pepper, spices, or herbs to elevate a dish from bland to brilliant. And we find out that John actually thought season only referred to winter, spring, summer, and fall.
Which is incredible.
He didn't conceptually know the culinary definition of the word, and therefore his food was chronically sad and unseasoned.
This connection between vocabulary and practical skill is profound, though. It brings to mind the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, who famously said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world."
Wow.
For John, the limits of his culinary vocabulary literally limited his physical ability to feed himself properly.
Wait, expand on that. Are you saying that because he didn't know the word, he couldn't perform the action?
Yes, exactly. He couldn't create a dish that wasn't sad because he didn't possess the abstract concept of seasoning. If you don't have the linguistic tool to categorize an action, you often lack the physical tool to execute it.
That is mind-blowing.
When you don't know the difference between the chaotic, destructive energy of a boil and the gentle, constructive melding of a simmer, you treat all heat as a single, blunt instrument. You treat everything like a rock concert.
You just turn the dial to 10 and hope for the best.
which invariably leads to disaster.
Because the kitchen doesn't care about your intentions. It only cares about physics.
Exactly. Cooking is applied science. It is thermodynamics and chemistry. And Emma highlights this absolute unforgiving nature of the kitchen with a brilliant grammar deep dive into what is known as the zero conditional rule.
Oh, right, the rice example.
Yes, she gives John a very stern example. If you cook rice too long, it burns.
Notice she doesn't say it will burn or it might burn, just it burns.
That is the architecture of the zero conditional. It uses the simple present tense in both the if clause, the condition, and the main clause, which is the result. If X happens, Y happens.
Cause and effect.
Right. It is a grammatical structure used exclusively for scientific facts and general undeniable truths. It entirely removes probability, negotiation, or emotion from the equation. It is absolute.
It's like explaining gravity. If you drop an apple, it falls. There's no emotion involved. So Emma is basically telling him that cooking is just a series of culinary gravities.
Precisely. The kitchen is an environment governed by a series of zero conditionals. If you do not season the food, it is bland. If you do not stir the sauce, it sticks. If you apply excessive heat to a carbohydrate for an extended duration, it burns.
It's just a law.
It is a universal law. John's chronic burnt rice experiences are simply a failure to respect the zero conditional of thermodynamics.
You cannot negotiate with a burning plot of rice.
Yeah.
It doesn't care that you had a long day at the office.
Yes.
It doesn't care that you are a creature of habit. It just burns.
No, it does.
This is actually the perfect time to bring up a prompt from the source material itself. Emma and John ask their audience to share their kitchen catastrophe stories. You know, the moments where they mistook salt for sugar or set a dish towel on fire.
Oh, everyone has one of those.
Think about your own culinary disasters. What was the biggest, most chaotic mistake you ever made in the kitchen? And more importantly, what zero conditional rule did the universe brutally teach you in that exact moment? Did you learn the hard way that if you leave hot oil unattended, it ignites? We have all been there.
Those catastrophes are necessary, though. They are the rites of passage. You cannot transition from being an assembler to a culinary artist without suffering the brutal lessons of the zero conditional.
But the beauty of this deep dive, and the conclusion that Emma and John ultimately reach, is that you don't have to suffer endlessly. It doesn't force you to choose one extreme or the other. We don't have to become Michelin-starred chefs operating flawlessly in a pristine kitchen, and we don't have to rely entirely on the delivery driver tracking our chili slate preferences.
Right, there is a middle ground.
The resolution of their entire debate is about finding equilibrium.
It is recognizing that the modern dietary divide is not a binary choice.
Right. So what does this all mean for us? The conclusion they arrive at is this brilliant concept of smart indulgence.
Or smart indulgence.
Yeah. The equilibrium looks like this. You cook simple, nourishing meals during the work week to save your money, protect your health, and respect these zero conditionals. And then you splash out on takeout on the weekend, entirely guilt-free, because you have earned the reward.
Which is very practical.
And to help John actually achieve this, Emma gives him a truly actionable piece of advice. She calls it the 3-recipe rule. She tells him to master just 3 simple, reliable, go-to recipes. That's it. No cookbooks, no complicated techniques. Just 3 things.
Just 3.
John immediately selects a basic pasta dish, an omelet, and the simmering soup that Emma promises to teach him. I find it fascinating how quickly John pivots. He goes from being a defensive takeout devotee protecting his gallery space to eagerly accepting the yoga retreat of making soup.
All because the barrier to entry was drastically lowered.
Exactly, to just 3 recipes.
This highlights the immense power of reducing cognitive load. We have to remember why the delivery app is so successful in the first place. It requires almost 0 cognitive friction.
Right, tap, 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 food.
You tap a piece of glass 3 times and food appears. When people who don't cook think about learning to cook, they picture mastering a massive encyclopedia of French techniques. They picture hours of agonizing labor and inevitable failure. It's overwhelming.
It's too much.
By introducing the 3-recipe rule, Emma fundamentally reduces the expectation. She shifts the goalpost from becoming a gourmet chef overnight to simply executing 3 highly specific, repeatable tasks.
It takes it from an impossible mountain to a small step.
It makes it highly achievable. If you can confidently, without stress, make 3 dishes that you actually enjoy eating, you naturally reduce your reliance on the takeout app without feeling deprived.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
And this synthesis perfectly satisfies both sides of the spectrum we've been discussing. It satisfies Emma's rigid need for health, ingredient control, and economic wisdom during the week. And it simultaneously satisfies John's psychological need for convenience and his desire to splash out and get that hug in a bowl on the weekend.
The best of both worlds.
It is the literal definition of the best of both worlds. Lowering the barrier to entry changes your identity. You don't have to adopt the persona of a home cook aficionado. You just have to be a person who happens to know how to make an omelet on a Tuesday.
And suddenly, the stove isn't just a glorified storage shelf acting as a modern art installation anymore. It's actually being utilized for its intended architectural purpose. Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today analyzing how our words dictate our meals. Let's do a rapid-fire review of the core concepts and the specific vocabulary we extracted from Emma and John's debate.
We began with the spatial and architectural divide. Order in versus dine in. The psychological shift between remaining stationary in your fortress versus going out into the community square.
We looked at the underlying motivations. Choosing an app because it is expedient and frictionless versus succumbing to the visceral, highly targeted emotional pull of a craving or a hankering.
We analyze the vocabulary of reward and justification, how we splash out on a treat to reframe an expense, and the deep emotional resonance of a go-to or comfort food, seeking that irreplaceable hug in a bowl when we are depleted.
On the home front, we discussed the power of control over ingredients, the energetic value of making things from scratch, and the overarching economic strategy of batch cooking to create those delightful, non-science experiment leftovers.
And finally, we covered the essential verbs that act as the foundational operating system of the kitchen. To peel, to stir, mastering the gentle yoga retreat of simmering, and the absolutely crucial act of seasoning.
Whether you see yourself as a culinary artist, wielding a whisk and mastering the zero conditionals, or an assembler tapping a screen to summon spicy noodles, the ultimate goal is balance. A little bit of cooking, a little bit of takeout. And as Emma repeatedly desperately stresses to John, for heaven's sake, remember to season your food.
Absolutely no sad, unseasoned meals allowed.
I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over today as you head toward dinner. We've seen how John's literal lack of the word season resulted in him eating physically bland food. He didn't know the word, so he couldn't perform the action.
Right.
So if the words we use actively construct our physical reality, how does mastering the advanced vocabulary of the kitchen, truly internalizing the mechanics of words like simmer from scratch or batch cooking, actually change our physical relationship with the food we consume? Can learning a new culinary word, literally, biologically, change the way you taste your dinner tonight?
It's a powerful, provocative question about how language constructs the very boundaries of our sensory experience.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the language of the kitchen. Keep pushing your boundaries. Keep exploring the hidden meanings of the words that shape your daily routines. And remember, there is absolutely no judgment on whatever you decide to eat tonight.
Well, maybe just a little bit of judgment if you forget to season it.
Fair enough. The next time you walk into your kitchen, take a good hard look around. Is it just a storage shelf? Or is it a laboratory just waiting for you to spark a zero conditional reaction? The choice is entirely yours. Imagine staring up at your pristine white kitchen ceiling,
Okay, I'm picturing it.
and you just find it absolutely dripping with scalding neon orange butternut squash puree.
Oh, that sounds like an absolute nightmare.
Right. I mean, you haven't just ruined dinner at that point. You've basically created a culinary crime scene in your own house.
Yeah, a complete disaster zone.
Exactly. So today, we're looking at how a single button press can completely destroy a kitchen. And, what that aftermath actually reveals about the psychology of modern cooking.
I love this topic.
Welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
It really is a striking image to start with, isn't it? Because, on the surface, the source material we are dissecting today just feels like a simple, highly relatable anecdote about a kitchen disaster.
Yeah, like something you'd tell at a party.
Exactly. We're looking at an excerpt from a show called Pod Zone. Specifically, it's this episode titled Culinary Carnage and the Gadget Debate.
Great title, by the way.
It is. And it features these two speakers, Emma and John. But if we actually look closely at how they discuss this disaster, they are delivering a total masterclass in underlying human behavior.
They really are.
Yeah.
We are essentially using this funny story about spilled soup to unpack, linguistics for one.
Right.
and the philosophy of modern domestic life. Plus, like the really deep-seated psychology of what it actually means to host other human beings in your home.
It goes so far beyond just a botched recipe.
It really does. So our mission today is to dissect the literal mechanics of failure.
Yes.
We want to understand those psychological safety blankets we reach for in the kitchen, and ultimately, examine how the language we use to describe our mistakes actively shapes our reality.
I think that's the most fascinating part, the language aspect.
Totally.
Yeah.
But before we get into the literal splash zone of this story, I want to ask you, the listener, a question.
A good idea.
Have you ever had a truly spectacular, undeniably epic failure in the kitchen? Like the kind you still haven't lived down to this day?
We all have one.
We definitely do. Or maybe take a mental walk to your kitchen right now. Do you have a specific drawer that is just overflowing with highly specific, entirely useless gadgets you bought at like 2 a.m.?
I feel personally attacked by that question.
I think we all have that drawer, but keep that mental image handy because we are going to be talking directly about why you actually bought those things.
Yes, we are.
So let's start with the inciting incident of the source material. The disaster itself. John's so-called soupocalypse.
I just love that he calls it that. So John sets the scene with this kind of ominous calm that always precedes a storm in a good story.
Right, the classic calm before the storm.
Exactly. He describes a cold Tuesday evening. He's feeling super inspired by a previous conversation he had with Emma, where he boldly promised a new me in the kitchen.
Which is always a dangerous promise to make.
Oh, completely. He is actively trying to shed his reputation as a terrible cook. So he decides to tackle a very manageable, very autumnal task. He's making a simple butternut squash soup.
And he emphasizes heavily that everything was going fine.
Right.
He notes that he had boiled the vegetables to a pulp and everything was just going, quote, swimmingly.
Swimmingly.
Yeah, which is such a deliberate word choice, right? Swimmingly implies smooth, effortless progress. The water is calm.
No waves at all.
Exactly. He has successfully navigated the prep, the chopping, the heating. The tension is completely absent for him because he believes he is on the home stretch.
But John's confidence is entirely misplaced here. Because as Emma points out in the excerpt, he has reached the final hurdle, the blending stage.
The dreaded blending stage.
And this is where the mechanical misunderstanding occurs. This is the absolute crux of the disaster.
Walk us through it.
Well, John reaches for what he incorrectly assumes is just a mechanized whisk.
A whisk.
Right. He describes it vaguely as like a contraption with a blade on the end, but what he is actually holding is an immersion blender.
Oh, boy. Emma, playing the role of the experienced guide in this dynamic, she immediately recognizes the danger in his description.
She knows exactly what's coming.
She warns him, saying, powerful tool, you have to respect it.
And John's response?
It's just the grim confession of a doomed man. He simply says, I did not respect it.
It's so funny. But the failure here stems from a profound lack of spatial and mechanical awareness on John's part.
Yeah, he just doesn't get the tool.
He takes this incredibly powerful motorized blade and plunges it into a pot that he specifically notes is filled to the brim.
Filled to the brim. That's rule number 1 of blending. Leave some space.
Exactly. Then, instead of simply pressing the button with caution, he holds it down like a trigger.
Oh, no.
And crucially, he does not fully submerge the blade before activating the motor.
I was actually trying to visualize the physics of this mistake while reading it. Because an immersion blender isn't just a spinning knife on a stick, an impeller. It is engineered specifically to pull liquid down into a tight vortex.
Right, it creates suction.
Yeah. So if you don't submerge the bell guard completely, it acts like a boat propeller lifted half out of the water.
That is a great comparison.
It just grabs the air and aggressively flings the liquid outward. Handing that tool to a kitchen novice like John, it's like handing the keys of a high-performance sports car to someone who has only ever ridden a tricycle.
Or handing them a high-pressure fire hose without telling them how to brace for the recoil.
Exactly. The raw power is there in the motor, right? But the technique, that nuanced understanding of how to create a controlled downward suction, it is completely absent. You just don't pull the trigger on a half-submerged immersion blender in a brim-filled pot.
You certainly don't. And the physical reality of that missing technique is immediate. And it is violent.
Very violent.
The source text uses incredibly vivid imagery to describe the aftermath here. John says the blender instantly created a vortex that unleashed a volcano of scalding orange liquid erupting straight out of the pot.
A volcano. He tells Emma that he decorated his pristine white kitchen walls in what looked like a Jackson Pollock painting.
And the visual contrast is stunning.
It really is.
Yeah.
You have this sterile, clean, very modern domestic space, suddenly and violently splattered with chaotic, abstract arcs of bright orange butternut squash puree.
It's a striking image.
And he even mentions there was soup on the ceiling. I mean, just think about the sheer physics required to launch heavy vegetable puree onto an 8 or 9 foot ceiling. It's staggering.
It's actually impressive in a really tragic way, but what is particularly revealing here is the escalation of the language he uses to describe the mess.
Right?
John calls it absolute carnage and a culinary Armageddon.
Armageddon for spilled soup.
Exactly. This is deliberate, calculated hyperbole. He is taking a mundane domestic mishap, literally just spilling food, and elevating it to the level of apocalyptic warfare.
Which is so interesting. Why do we do that? Like, why not just say, hey, I made a mess?
Because honestly, we use extreme, catastrophic language to process our own embarrassment.
Ah, I see.
By painting the failure as this massive, uncontrollable act of culinary nature, a volcano, an Armageddon, it somehow softens the blow of personal culpability.
Right. It wasn't his fault. It was the volcano's fault.
Exactly. It shields his ego from simply having to admit, I don't know how to use a basic kitchen appliance.
That makes a lot of sense. It's significantly easier to survive a quote-unquote volcano than to look in the mirror and admit you just made a fundamental, foolish mistake with a handheld motor.
Yes, exactly.
And John actually uses his lack of knowledge as a literal defense mechanism in the conversation. When Emma points out the technical error of not submerging the blade, John protests. He says, these are details a novice like me was not privy to.
He wears his novice status like a suit of armor.
He really does.
But John's excuse that he's just a novice, it actually reveals a much broader problem in modern domestic life. He is terrified of his own tools. He just doesn't understand the mechanisms of the things he owns, which is exactly why he naturally gravitates toward the complete opposite of an immersion blender.
The highly specialized, idiot-proof gadget, the unitasker. This soupocalypse, it basically sets John's culinary journey back by like 5 years. But it sparks this massive, fascinating debate between him and Emma about the philosophy of the equipment we rely on.
And Emma makes her stance crystal clear right away. She represents the culinary purist.
She does.
She explicitly states she is a huge proponent of the less is more philosophy. She believes you only need a few high-quality tools, which she refers to as indispensable workhorses.
Indispensable workhorses. I like that phrase.
It implies reliability, right? She provides a very specific minimalist list. A sharp chef's knife, a heavy-bottomed pan, and a solid chopping board.
That's it.
For Emma, cooking is entirely about foundational skills interacting with foundational tools. The tool is simply an extension of the cook's capability.
Right. Contrast that with John, who openly confesses he is, quote, a sucker for a gimmicky gadget.
He owns it, at least.
He really does. He is drawn entirely to the allure of the one-trick pony. He proudly lists things like the avocado slicer.
Oh, the avocado slicer.
The spiralizer, which he hilariously notes was all the rage 5 years ago.
Which is so true. Everyone had one in 2018.
Right. And of course, the classic garlic press.
Emma has absolutely zero patience for this approach. She mercilessly deconstructs the concept of the unitasker. She argues that these items are entirely superfluous.
Superfluous.
Yes. In her view, they offer this false promise of efficiency. But in reality, a properly handled chef's knife can accomplish the job of an avocado slicer, a spiralizer, and a garlic press in a fraction of the time.
If you know how to use it.
Exactly. Furthermore, she points out the harsh practical truth about these gadgets. They are significantly harder to clean than just wiping down a flat knife blade.
Ugh, cleaning a garlic press is the worst.
It is. And because of that, they inevitably end up languishing in a drawer, just taking up valuable real estate in your kitchen.
Okay, I have to jump in here and defend John for a second.
Go for it.
Because Emma's culinary purism, as right as she might be technically, it feels a bit disconnected from the emotional reality of the amateur cook. Well, Emma looks at an avocado slicer and just sees a superfluous, wasteful piece of green plastic. But look at John's immediate context.
The soup on the ceiling.
Exactly. The man just painted his ceiling with scalding orange soup because he misunderstood the physics of a motor. For someone who is genuinely terrified of causing another disaster, does John's attraction to unitaskers highlight a deep, valid psychological need for safety?
I see where you're going. But safety at what cost?
Hear me out. A razor-sharp chef's knife is a genuinely intimidating tool.
It can be, sure.
It requires technique, it requires grip confidence, and honestly, if you use it wrong, the consequences are a trip to the emergency room for stitches.
That is fair.
But a gadget that only does one specific thing. An avocado slicer can literally only slice an avocado. A spiralizer only makes zucchini noodles. It feels inherently safer because it entirely removes the variable of human error.
It limits the potential for disaster.
Exactly. It's like bowling with the bumper lanes up. For a novice, the unitasker isn't about laziness. It's about reducing the intimidation factor to absolute zero. It guarantees the outcome.
I hear that argument, and I agree the psychological comfort is undeniable for someone like John.
Right.
But by relying on the bumpers of a unitasker, John is actually making himself far more vulnerable to disasters when he is inevitably forced to use a real tool.
Because he never learns how.
Precisely. He is actively atrophying his own capability. Emma's workhorses require a foundation of skill. If you lack that skill, yes, the kitchen feels like a hostile environment.
Extremely hostile.
But John's reliance on gadgets is just a way of buying temporary artificial competence. He is outsourcing the skill to the plastic machine.
Outsourcing the skill. I like that.
The profound problem, as Emma rightly identifies, is that this prevents him from ever actually developing the foundational skills necessary to become comfortable in his own kitchen.
He's stuck.
He remains a permanent novice, forever dependent on the bumpers.
And when you are permanently dependent on the bumpers, you know what happens.
What?
You become incredibly susceptible to marketing.
Ah, yes.
Which is exactly where their debate inevitably lands on the modern kitchen's most beloved yet polarizing device, the air fryer.
Oh, the air fryer. It is the ultimate test case for this exact philosophical divide.
It really is.
John views the air fryer as a potential savior. He hears the cultural zeitgeist raving about it, on social media and from friends. And he genuinely asks Emma, quote, "Will it bring my sad, unseasoned food to life?"
That is such a tragic question.
It is. He isn't asking for a cooking method. He is looking for a literal salvation in a machine.
He wants a magic box that turns a complete lack of skill into a Michelin star meal just by pressing a button.
Exactly. But Emma, maintaining her rigorous, purist stance, she ruthlessly strips away the marketing magic.
She brings him back down to earth.
She defines the air fryer strictly for what it mechanically is. A small, high-powered convection oven.
That's all it is, folks.
She concedes it has utility, sure. It is great for reheating leftovers and achieving crispiness with way less oil. But she firmly states it is a tool, not a miracle worker.
Right.
An air fryer cannot season your food for you. It cannot teach you flavor profiles. It will not magically bestow culinary intuition upon you.
It's a harsh reality check. The tool can only ever amplify what the cook actually provides.
Exactly.
And this realization that John's lack of foundational skill cannot be permanently masked by plugging in a gadget, it forces their whole conversation to pivot.
It does.
Because if the mechanical tools in the kitchen are just too fraught with danger and anxiety, the obvious next question is, well, why bother cooking at all?
Right. Why put yourself through it?
So the debate shifts seamlessly from the mechanical how of cooking to the sociological why.
And this is perhaps the most profound contrast between Emma and John in the entire excerpt. They begin to unpack the social dimension of food and their completely opposing views on what it actually means to host others.
Yeah, their philosophies here are night and day.
Emma views the act of cooking for friends and family as, quote, a profound gesture of affection.
The language she uses here is incredibly evocative. She describes the act of preparing a meal and sharing it as deeply primordial and communal.
Primordial.
Such a heavy word. It evokes something ancient, right? Something woven directly into our evolutionary DNA. The act of gathering around the fire, sharing the resources of the hunt, ensuring the survival of the tribe.
It's very poetic.
Emma argues that the literal act of breaking bread together is this intimate, vulnerable experience that you simply cannot replicate with a stack of cardboard takeaway boxes. For her, the strenuous effort of cooking is the love language.
It's a romantic, deeply traditional view of hospitality.
It is.
But John offers a very stark, very pragmatic, modern counter-narrative to that.
He's not having the primordial fire idea.
No, he advocates for ordering takeaway, and his primary defense is psychological. He says it takes the pressure off.
Which is totally valid.
John points out a classic trope of modern socializing that we all intimately familiar with, the stressed-out host.
Oh, man. Think about the last time you hosted a dinner, listener, or went to someone's house for one. Were you actually sitting at the table, engaged in the conversation? Or were you sequestered in the kitchen, sweating profusely over a risotto while your guests drank your wine in the living room without you?
We've all been there. John argues that the primordial vision Emma holds often results in the host being completely isolated from the party they themselves organize.
Which defeats the purpose of the party.
Exactly. He posits that ordering takeaway actually democratizes the gathering.
Democratizes it.
Yeah, it removes the hierarchy of the servant host and the served guest. It frees the host up to actually be present, to engage, to look their friends in the eye rather than managing a high-stress culinary timeline.
And John brings up a logistical reality that makes Emma's romantic vision incredibly difficult to execute today.
The dietary restrictions.
Yes. He outlines a hypothetical but honestly very common modern scenario. You have guests coming over. One is strictly vegan, another is celiac, so completely gluten-free. Someone else has a massive craving for Mexican food, while another person really just wants Japanese.
Just listening to that gives me anxiety. The cognitive load of managing those dietary restrictions and preferences is immense.
Practically a full-time job.
Cooking a single, cohesive meal from scratch that safely and deliciously satisfies all those parameters is a logistical nightmare.
It really is.
It requires multiple separate cooking spaces, extreme cross-contamination protocols, and a deep, deep knowledge of substitute ingredients. For a novice like John, it is an impossible barrier to entry.
John argues that an eclectic mix of ordered food solves this complex puzzle instantly. Everyone gets exactly what they want, their dietary needs are safely met by specialized restaurants, and most importantly, the host doesn't suffer a nervous breakdown before the appetizers are even served.
What is fascinating is that Emma actually concedes the logic of this point.
She does. She sees his point.
She summarizes the ultimate trade-off perfectly. By ordering in, you are willingly trading the personal, intimate touch of a home-cooked meal for a more relaxed, varied, and anxiety-free social experience.
It is a calculation of priorities.
Exactly. Are you prioritizing the intimate gesture of effort, even if it causes you immense stress? Or are you prioritizing the guaranteed harmony and presence of a relaxed host?
I want you to genuinely consider your own mindset on this, listener. When you invite people into your home, what are you actually chasing?
It's a great question.
Are you chasing that primordial connection, willing to risk the stress of a ruined dish just to show your affection through labor? Or are you prioritizing the eclectic, anxiety-free pragmatism that John advocates for? Like, does hospitality mean providing the food, or does it mean providing the company?
It really is a defining question of modern domestic sociology, and John caps off this entire argument with a moment of stark self-awareness.
Oh, this is the best part.
He admits that given his current skill level and, recent trauma with the blender, if he were to attempt cooking for a group, the anxiety alone would ruin the evening for everyone.
Right.
But it is in the exact phrasing of this admission that the entire nature of the source material suddenly shifts on its axis.
Yes, this is the most brilliant structural pivot in the excerpt. John is explaining his anxiety, and he casually says, quote, "Were I to cook?" And Emma literally stops the conversation in its tracks. She breaks the fourth wall entirely.
Up until this exact second, the listener just assumes they are hearing two friends debate kitchen appliances and takeout menus.
Just a normal podcast.
Exactly. But when Emma stops him to praise his grammar, asking the audience, did you catch that advanced grammatical structure John just used?
That's such a shock.
The curtain is suddenly pulled back. The actual meta-purpose of the Pod Zone show is revealed. It is a platform for high-level language education.
And John plays along beautifully. He acts playfully ignorant and asks, did I do a good grammar?
It's very charming.
It retroactively recontextualizes the entire story. This whole anecdote about the soupocalypse, the intense debate about the unitaskers, it was all a carefully constructed vehicle to showcase sophisticated English.
And we really need to analyze the mechanics of what just happened linguistically here, because Emma highlights that John used a formal conditional structure with inversion.
Okay, let's break that down for people who aren't grammar nerds.
Right. To understand why this is praise, we have to look at how conditional sentences usually function. In standard everyday English, someone expressing a hypothetical would typically use the word if as a crutch.
Right, they would say, if I were to cook for a group of people.
Exactly. It's functional, but it's pedestrian.
Pedestrian. Wow, okay, grammar snob. But you're right.
Well, it is. But John inverted the subject and the verb, and he completely dropped the if. He said, were I to cook.
Were I to cook.
What happens mechanically in the brain when a speaker does this is fascinating. By dropping the common signifier if and front-loading the verb, the speaker demands a higher level of cognitive engagement from the listener to parse the hypothetical nature of the sentence.
It forces you to pay attention.
Exactly. It instantly shifts the register of the conversation from casual to highly authoritative and literary. It creates syntactic weight.
Syntactic weight. I love that. It just sounds incredibly elegant, right? It commands a different kind of respect.
It certainly does.
Emma gives him top marks for it, categorizing it as a very formal way to express a hypothetical situation. John jokingly calls it unintentional genius. But the linguistic deep dive doesn't stop at the grammar.
No, it goes much further.
The source text then moves into a dedicated review of C2 level vocabulary that John and Emma have been naturally, stealthily weaving throughout the entire episode.
And this is where we see the profound psychological function of words. The hosts don't just list dictionary definitions, which would be boring. They demonstrate how vocabulary acts as a tool for framing reality.
Right. Let's look at the words they review, and more importantly, how they function in the context of the story itself.
They start with carnage.
Carnage. We touched on this earlier.
Right. John uses a word that literally means bloody and extensive slaughter to describe pureed squash.
It's hilarious.
He isn't just describing a mess. He is utilizing extreme hyperbole to dwarf his own mistake. The word carnage functions as an emotional shield.
It really does. It turns a moment of sheer incompetence into an epic tale of survival, like he barely made it out alive.
Precisely. Then Emma highlights the word novice, a person inexperienced in a field.
And John basically weaponized this word earlier.
It did. He didn't say, I was careless. He said, I am a novice.
By labeling his identity rather than his action, he absolves himself of the expectation of competence. The word acts as a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Exactly. Then they review the contrasting terms from their gadget debate. Indispensable and superfluous.
Okay, let's dig into those.
John defines indispensable as absolutely necessary, like Emma's chef's knife.
Right.
And superfluous means entirely unnecessary, like the unitaskers.
But in the context of their debate, these aren't just adjectives, right? They are the philosophical stakes of the entire argument.
Yes.
Emma is arguing that a minimalist approach is indispensable to true skill, while John's reliance on gadgets is a superfluous distraction from learning.
Which connects directly to the next word Emma defines. Gimmicky.
Gimmicky.
A device or idea intended to attract attention but having little real value.
This is the marketing mechanism that preys on the novice.
Exactly. The gimmick promises to solve the anxiety of cooking without requiring the effort of actually learning. And the physical embodiment of the gimmick is the unitasker, a tool restricted to a single function.
Moving into the vocabulary of their social debate, John defines primordial, which means existing from the beginning of time, basic, and fundamental.
And Emma used this to elevate the act of making dinner into a sacred evolutionary imperative.
It's a brilliant rhetorical strategy on her part. By calling a dinner party primordial, she makes John's preference for ordering pizza seem shallow and disconnected from, like, human nature itself.
It's a very strong argument, but John counters that with the idiom to take the pressure off, meaning to remove a source of stress or responsibility.
This is the modern psychological counterweight to the primordial urge. We crave connection, but we are crippled by the pressure of performance.
Perfectly said. And finally, John defines eclectic, deriving ideas or taste from a broad and diverse range of sources.
He uses this to describe the mix of takeaway cuisines. It's such a fantastic spin.
It is a great rebrand.
He isn't saying we haphazardly ordered a bunch of random junk food because we panicked. He is saying we curated an eclectic dining experience.
The vocabulary completely upgrades the perceived value of the action.
What is truly fascinating to me here is the juxtaposition of the speaker and the language.
What do you mean?
Think about the tension we are analyzing. The character of John is a self-proclaimed fumbling novice who just caused a culinary Armageddon because he didn't understand how a blender worked.
Right, he's a disaster in the kitchen.
Yet, he is simultaneously wielding C2 level, highly advanced vocabulary and inverted conditional grammar with absolute precision to describe his own ineptitude.
It is brilliantly meta.
It really is. They are using this incredibly sophisticated, razor-sharp language to debate the necessity of sophisticated, razor-sharp tools.
It proves a really comforting, funny point, honestly.
Which is?
You might be an absolute disaster in the physical world of the kitchen. You might not know the difference between a whisk and an impeller. But you can still be an absolute master of how you communicate your failures to the world.
Language is the ultimate tool they are showcasing here. It's the one indispensable workhorse John actually knows how to use flawlessly.
That's a great way to put it. By utilizing that high-level vocabulary, John transforms a very simple, potentially humiliating anecdote into a compelling tragicomic narrative.
The words elevate his experience from a failure to pure entertainment.
But the narrative arc of the source material doesn't end with John simply resting on his linguistic laurels. Emma ensures that.
Right, because Emma isn't going to let John just hide behind his fancy words and his takeaway boxes forever. The climax of the excerpt arrives when Emma forces a real-world resolution to their entire debate.
She throws down the gauntlet.
This is the critical turning point. Despite John's insistence that his cooking is a liability, and despite his masterful use of language to defend his retreat from the kitchen, Emma challenges him.
She challenges him to cook a proper 3-component meal for her.
Yeah.
Entirely from scratch.
A 3-component meal.
She offers to provide the recipe, which removes the variable of choice. But crucially, she adds a massive condition.
The condition is brutal. They are going to film it for their subscribers.
The sudden spike in pressure is palpable. You can feel John's hesitation instantly through the text.
He literally stammers out, "You want me to perform after the soupocalypse." That's a tall order.
The psychology here is fascinating. His performance anxiety, which was already high enough to make him rely on avocado slicers and takeaway apps, is now astronomical.
Oh, off the charts. Because he is experiencing literal post-disaster trauma. The idea of being observed, of having his potential incompetence permanently documented on camera after he just painted his ceiling with squash, is terrifying to him.
But Emma's insistence in this moment is the ideological core of the entire episode. She doesn't let him back down.
She refuses.
She simply states, it's the only way forward. And this directly connects back to the educational sign-off of the Pod Zone episode, where Emma tells the listeners every conversation is a step forward.
That is such a powerful philosophy.
If we explore the underlying message of this text, it is a profound thesis on the nature of learning. Failure is not a destination.
Right.
Whether it is a catastrophic failure in cooking or a stumbling failure in language learning, a mistake is not a valid reason to quit. It is merely a baseline. It is the raw data from which you must improve.
I really have to admire Emma's framing here. She completely embodies the true spirit of an educator. Throughout the excerpt, she shifts seamlessly from debating John-like, matching him point for point on the philosophy of gadgets and the sociology of hosting, to actively challenging him to grow.
She doesn't just critique him.
Exactly. She provides a pathway out of his incompetence. She is firm, but she's supportive. She's giving him the recipe, she's setting the parameters, but she is definitively forcing him to take the training wheels off.
No more bumpers.
No unitaskers, no takeaway menus, just him, the raw ingredients, the indispensable workhorses, and the camera. It's a brilliant teaching mechanism.
It really is a testament to the fundamental truth that true learning, genuine skill acquisition, it requires stepping out of the comfort zone.
Yes.
John has retreated into the safety of plastic gadgets and the frictionless convenience of ordering in. He has built this fortress of C2 vocabulary to protect his ego from his lack of physical skill.
And Emma is systematically dismantling that fortress.
She is pushing him back into the arena. She recognizes that the only way to conquer the fear of the tool is to use the tool.
Well said. We have covered a massive amount of ground today, and we need to pull all these threads together.
We certainly have.
We started in the chaotic, splattered vortex of a butternut squash disaster, analyzing the literal physics of a misunderstood kitchen motor.
Right. And then we moved from that mechanical failure into a deep philosophical debate about the tools we use to navigate our lives.
Are you a minimalist relying on indispensable workhorses, or are you seeking the comforting but limiting safety of superfluous gadgets?
Then we explored the deep sociological divide between the primordial, vulnerable intimacy of cooking for others versus the pragmatic, anxiety-free reality of modern hosting and dietary logistics.
And finally, we uncovered the linguistic mechanics beneath it all. We examined how conditional inversions and C2-level vocabulary aren't just dictionary definitions. They are psychological tools we use to frame our reality, shield our egos, and make sense of our own clumsiness.
It's a remarkable amount of depth extracted from a single story about spilling soup.
The layers of human behavior present in mundane domestic moments are just always richer than we expect.
They really are.
So, as a call to action for you, the listener, we have to echo the sign-off question from our source material. Emma and John asked their audience, and now we are asking you.
Look at your own kitchen.
What is your absolute, most indispensable kitchen tool? The one thing you could not function without? And, perhaps more revealingly, what is the most useless, gimmicky unitasker you have ever purchased in a moment of aspirational weakness?
As John said in the source text, it is time to confess your sins of the spiralizer.
We've all fallen for the promise of a gimmick at some point. I know I have.
It's a highly revealing exercise in evaluating what we actually need to be capable versus what we are just sold to feel safe.
Exactly. Now, before we sign off, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've dissected today regarding language and failure.
Okay, lay it on us.
We've seen exactly how John uses advanced language to describe his kitchen disaster. But think about the broader implications of this. If language truly shapes our reality, does possessing a highly sophisticated vocabulary actually alter the way we process our own failures internally?
Oh, that is a profound question of cognitive framing.
Right.
Does the caliber of the vocabulary fundamentally change the emotional impact of the memory itself?
Yes. Think about it. If you lack the words, a failure is just a raw, shameful feeling. It just sits there. But does having the right words, the eloquent words like carnage and primordial, allow us to immediately alchemize a messy, embarrassing disaster into an entertaining analytical narrative?
That makes so much sense.
Does language act as the ultimate bumper lane, protecting us from the deep shame of simply being a novice at life? If you possess the vocabulary to describe the ruined soup dripping from your ceiling as a Jackson Pollock painting, maybe you aren't just a bad cook standing in a mess anymore.
What are you then?
Maybe, through the power of language, you become an artist of chaos.
Wow. That is a fascinating perspective on the defensive, transformative power of human eloquence.
It really makes you think about the stories you tell yourself when things go wrong. Because at the end of the day, whether you're trying to navigate the pristine, highly engineered expectations of a modern recipe, or you're just standing there staring at an orange volcano erupting from a pot, the way you choose to frame the experience in your own mind might be the most indispensable tool you possess.
No, true.
Keep that X-ray machine of your mind sharp, even when the picture gets messy. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.